pass a microphone around. Abdul's got a microphone. I've got a microphone. So we'll take your questions. We are also live streaming this right now. It's going out on the Greater Lawrence Chamber Facebook page, and anybody else who can pick up the stream. So we're also going to record this. We'll edit it down, and then we'll republish it here at some point in the next couple days. So without further ado, Senator Zay, I will let you have the floor.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all coming out. Brad, thanks a ton for you and the chamber organizing tonight. I guess what I like to share and where I'm coming from, what I want to speak to tonight, is about getting Main Street moving again in small business. I am not a small businessman by choice. I was born into it. My parents and family, I'm the third generation of small business back home. So for me to stand up, to stand tall for small business in a year like we've had this year, where I've seen so many of my colleagues and friends struggle, particularly in industries like restaurants, entertainment, hospitality venues. It's been a tough year. So I, through some downtime like we've all had, have had the opportunity to contemplate what are some initiatives that I can bring forward and help small business. And some of them, quite honestly, are legacy problems. They're issues that we've dealt with and have been dealing with, whether we've had the shutdown and the virus as we have this year or not. So I'm quickly going to run through the initiative, kind of the platform that I'm working on heading into our legislative session this year, and that I will try and continue to work through that. And along with many other things, which we can do that on the backside of tonight's visit. But again, thank you all for coming out, and I'm happy to share with you my passion and my desire to try and support and help our small businesses across our state, because I believe small business is really the essence of who we are as a state and where we're going to go and be as a state. So quickly, 4 legislative initiatives I have that I'm going to try and advance this legislative session. The first one, which everybody, a lot of people are in agreement on, is the civil immunity. We've got to work to give some exemptions to businesses, not-for-profits, schools, groups to get together and not be held liable. We've never, to my knowledge, there hasn't been, any lawsuits for people transferring the cold and when they go out in public. And I don't mean to minimize that with COVID, obviously, but we've got to be responsible for our own health when we're out in society. And so that is my number one initiative, which I think we've found a lot of agreement on in the legislative body, and is something that we are going to tackle very quickly. So the civil immunity piece is a big piece. The second issue is I think there's an opportunity to expand the small business tax credit, the venture tax capital credit. The VCI tax credit was passed just a few years ago. The focus of that at the time was really to invest in tech companies and to expand the technology footprint here in the state of Indiana. And I think the emphasis of that at the time was really around the Amazon competition. Where was Amazon going to be in Indianapolis? It was kind of in the running for that. But we also wanted to bring in some of the other subsidiary industries that are around that. And the limitation of the venture tax capital credit is kind of structured around that. And I think now, with coming out of the shutdown that hopefully we will begin doing soon, we need to take the lid off of that. We need to make that available to all small business. We need to make that available to our entrepreneurs. We need to incentivize and bring venture tax credits and venture capital into the state of Indiana to revive the entrepreneurship, the small business networks that we have all throughout our state, and not limit it just to tech companies and that kind of thing. And there's some limitation. I mean, there are some exemptions in there where you can get outside of that, but I'm hoping to bring some clarifying language to really kind of expand that and open that up so that we can spring out and begin to help businesses that are struggling and those that are coming back create new businesses. The third legislative initiative I have is last year I worked pretty passionately with the Farm Bureau industry. The farmers are they're business folks, and it was very difficult for them financially to access the plans in the Affordable Care Act and or go out on their own and get health insurance. So what we allowed Farm Bureau to do was allow the farmers to come together and pool where they can get health benefits through coming together collaboratively. And I relate to that as a small business person. That is a huge barrier of entry in beginning and starting your own business. If you step down from a very secure position in a large entity that is providing health benefits for you, to go out and take that on for yourself and a few employees can be a large cost in the overhead of beginning your new business. So I'm hopeful, which is an initiative of the federal administration that was passed in 2017 through an executive order of Donald Trump and his administration, that we can carry that on where we can have associations like Brad represents, either chambers of commerce or business associations that can pool together and at least have some health benefits if they don't have full-blown health insurance. So just anything to kind of give access to health care without going into all the expense of a full-blown health plan. And then finally, in working with my congressman up north, Congressman Jim Banks, he was getting some inquiries about the PPP and what are the ramifications of that going to be next year as far as taxation and those sort of things. So they've done some of that on the federal taxation where that will be exempt. I want to have clarifying language at the state level to make sure that carries through in our state taxes as well. So that continuity of how that's being administered at the federal level is also the case at the state level. And so those are the 4 legislative initiatives. And the 2 things I'm chasing right now, along with many of us in the state of Indiana, are some of the CARES Act dollars. As of a short time ago, the state of Indiana was sitting on $1.2 billion. That money all needs to be spent by December 30th. So there's going to be a yard sale downtown and there's going to be money flying everywhere. So right now a lot of that's being spent in ways that I would consider not very tangible, not very good investments. So a priority I've been working on with my colleagues in Northeast Indiana, which is an area where we were highly exposed in March and April with the shutdown, is connectivity and broadband. We sent all our school kids home to rural areas, and even the largest school corporation in the state of Indiana, Fort Wayne Community Schools, did not even have e-learning when we sent the kids home last year. So there's a huge need for that in the education space, in healthcare. Parkview is our big health system up in Northeast Indiana. Their telehealth went up 3,500% this year. And then, of course, working remotely business-wise, working from your home, which a lot of businesses are going to continue to do that. There are many business folks that are going to work home through the remainder of this year, and as long as the productivity elements that they're looking for are occurring, many of them will continue that. But the key to that is all access, and that's certainly something that's exposed in a lot of the territory and areas that I represent. And of course, our telehealth won't remain at the level it's at. And we're not going to continue to, have all our kids go virtually forever. But telehealth is here to stay. There have been immense benefits to that. I mean, think about going to the doctor's office and handling that magazine that 500,000 other sick people have handled with the date on the top from 2002.
Good point.
So there's probably a few germs on that you're accessing to that you're not going to have through a video screen. And I just don't think our kids should be limited in their educational opportunities, whether it's virtual or whether they are at school. And to have that better connectivity at home is going to build that bridge and allow them to have access to their education at any time, and really at any level. We talk about it a lot in the K through 12 space, but we've certainly seen that with our institutions of higher ed as well. And that's something that the ag community has been screaming for forever, because our combines, which all those are getting in the fields, and our tractors and those things right now, they have very sophisticated technology on those equipment where they need access to have the efficiencies they need to run their farm appropriately. And then finally is another CARES Act initiative, and I don't put a lot of detail in it, but it's something that I encourage the governor and his team and maybe IEDC or the Indiana Finance Authority to be creative and really be creative and maybe not too structured, but push money down to the local level. I think the 5th guideline in the federal CARES Act guidelines was the last-ditch effort of Congress beyond the PPP program to say help out our small business. It almost verbatim spells it out that way. And whether it's giving Brad and the local Chamber of Commerce some creativity to create revolving loan funds or grant funds that can help the smallest of businesses that have struggled through this year, or working with community banks in different parts of the state and allowing them to vet those businesses that are in need and needing to rebound, or some that will be hatched and creating new businesses coming out of that. We need to try and drive those dollars down to the local. And I just think those are two critical areas in the CARES Act fund. I, in my own business, have been working through some local funding that it's almost tragic from the vantage point that we have a small business loan program through our county where we can apply and we can get masks, we can get gloves, we can get vinegar, we can get Clorox, you can get peroxide, you can get 10 or 12 different things that they've enumerated. So I can get 5 years, 10 years worth of vinegar and cleaning supplies for my whole business, but that, in my opinion, does not investment make. When you talk about structurally putting money into broadband or in tangible business loan investments, I think you're talking about not only investing in today of Hoosiers and Hoosier economy, but investing in the future. And that's honestly what's going to be the critical part of coming out of this. Certainly all the health ramifications are huge and how and where we're going to get through all that and the masks and the vaccines and all that. But economically, this year, the federal government's going to keep printing money and handing it out as long as they can. But next year and the year after is what I'm really worried about. And how can we take this $1.2 billion and get our most bang for our buck? Though it needs to be spent right now by December 30th, how can we invest or somehow commit it to things that are down the road? And I wouldn't fight so hard for the broadband if I didn't know it wasn't being done elsewhere. And right now I know that 22 other states have invested in rural broadband and in connectivity. So I know the option and the flexibility is out there to do it. What we need is the heart and commitment of our administration, the Indiana Finance Authority, to make that initiative, look at some of the plans that they've been presented and make that bold step. And I'm very hopeful, I'm very optimistic that they will respond to some of the plans that have been put before them and hopefully act on that by the end of the year. And in the end of the day, it's going to be able to defend that from the federal administration, from the Inspector General, because that's what they say one of their barriers is if they give it out, or they're going to have to claw it back and give it back to Washington. And we don't want to go through that headache. But I'll put Indiana up against our peers in the state level anywhere in the country. And we shouldn't be bashful for that, because I know that California, New York, even our neighbors over in Illinois are not discerning on their federal CARES Act funds as much as we seem to be here in Indiana. So I'm just hopeful that we can look at the future and make tangible investments that will make a difference instead of Clorox and vinegar and gloves. Not that those aren't needed, but I would gladly spend my own money on that instead of getting reimbursed if we could make tangible investments in things like connectivity. So that's what I've been sharing. I've shared it with a number of groups up in my neck of the woods. I have been presenting it downtown to Chris Johnston and the team at the Indiana Finance Authority and the governor's task force that's been working through this on the CARES Act stuff. The legislative stuff, I've already begun to garner some support from some of my colleagues and get the bill preparation started on that, and in hopes certainly of getting it done, but also getting my work done in what I know will be a very, very busy session this year, which I didn't even touch on the elephants in the room, so to speak, which there will be many of those coming up once we get beyond the election, because it is a budget year. So thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions on this, maybe I should go ahead and take a few of those right now, and then we'll kind of open it up to all three of us to talk about other state issues. Does anybody have any small business questions or on what I presented?
Questions?
Yeah.
Mike?
What is I'm Dan Drexler. I'm the regional director with the Small Business Development Center here out of Indianapolis, hosted at Butler University. I don't know if that. Oh, I guess I need to learn how to use a microphone. I'm curious. Well, I don't know if this is working.
I can hear you. Just speak.
I'm curious about the PPP loan non-taxable issue. What kind of traction are you getting on that? Because just some clarity to that is so essential for our small businesses right now. And just knowing what they're supposed to be doing is critical. And that's a beautiful, beautiful proposal right there.
It's supposed to be a forgivable loan, but it's actually not. So be interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, and I don't have any inside knowledge, and probably a lot of what we are really looking for there is when you're talking about guidance is looking at Washington, D.C. Because there's even been some conversation with where I received a PPP loan, and with my bank there was conversation about forgiving everything automatically at a certain level, like anything under 150. And I submitted 25 pages of scanned documents to get relief on $7,000 in PPP loans. My wife does mortgages for a living, and I felt like a mortgage officer the time I was done getting all this submitted. And it was pretty extensive, and I'm like, yeah, this is crazy. There's folks that even got less than I, and they're going to have to submit like all the quarterly statements, all the deposits they've made, and payroll taxes. Whereas other companies, of course, have accounting teams, and $10 million, I think, was the max. So there's many in those millions of dollar areas. So I think, that guidance would be very helpful. That guidance is going to guide even what I'm proposing here is what the exemption will be next year. And I think there's still things coming through on that. My understanding and speaking with some of the policy and the LSA team downtown is that a lot of that comes through federally kind of automatically blends through, but I'm going to make sure of that, and that's one thing I'm going to kind of put my eye on. And if we have to have legislation or anything to do that, that's really what I'm tracking and kind of putting LSA and those folks on notice to make sure that continuity is there. Because you are absolutely right, it is a big deal. It was a good idea that kind of came out of the shutdown, and we need to make sure it's executed all the way through. And actually, I heard today that they're actually talking. Well, the state, first of all, I believe, has created an option because you got a PPP loan, disqualified you from some small business relief, and I think they exempted that now where you can get that. And the feds are even talking about another round of that. So, but I don't know if they'll get anything done in D.C. Yes, sir.
There we go. Ooh, I do have a loud voice. On your virtual business tax credit, obviously next year is a budget year, and so any idea how much expanding the virtual tax credit would cost to all small businesses? Because the money's got to come from somewhere.
Right. No, that's a good point, and I mean we'll have to draw some lines. I'll have to do some research to see how much it's been accessed. That idea was brought to me because the lanes were kind of narrow, so I don't think we even expended what we thought we would when we originally created the program a few years ago. So no, there certainly is some research. That these are kind of broad ideas right now. There will be a lot of ironing out of those details, and there won't be a lot of money, which is honestly, to go back to my other point of the broadband, that's why I think it's so important to make that investment now, because we won't be talking about any extra money next year.
How much are you asking for the broadband?
Well, the state can spend all they want because it's about an $8 to $10 billion issue in the state of Indiana, and what I hear from some of those that are installing it now is if the state can commit to a 10 to 20% down payment, those that are the investors will continue that investment for the other 75 to 80%. In Northeast Indiana, we're looking about $100 million to $150 million investment. And that would in turn create $1 billion of investment and be a total game changer in connectivity for Northeast Indiana. So that, if you look at it in congressional districts, we got 9 of those, you're looking at $7 to $8 billion. But that would be if we invested, $500 million or $700 million, it would change the landscape of connectivity. And I really think that's the next frontier in business. Because the kids and people, this next generation coming out of school or coming into the work world right now, they're checking off access to the internet and connectivity before they care where their poop goes or where their water comes from. That's the most important thing.
What did you say?
And so the state that figures that out.
Soundbite.
Are you on the ballot?
Well, no, seriously. No, that's fine. I would stand by that statement. I think that is the most important thing to the next generation. And the state that figures that out will have a leg up in the next economic growth. And I think that's and I think that's why it's important to look at CARES Act money now, because These conversations of spending will go away really quickly come January 1. Mishler's already told me, you go meet with them, your first is no, and then no. So I mean, and I get it, and we're going to be in that position. It's going to be a tight budget cycle. Anyone else? Yeah.
Another question. And this is going to be weird because this has nothing to do with getting Main Street moving again. I keep hearing that there are a lot of lawmakers, both in the House and the Senate, that basically want to rein in the governor's emergency power declaration authority. And so I figure I'll ask you three gentlemen, where are you with that, and where is that? Is it just talk right now, or because I know the House is kind of doing things as a caucus. So you guys met like last Tuesday as a caucus over at the hotel in Carmel.
That's a great transition. I'll let these guys speak first. I'll opinion on it.
Eject, is that what you just
No, I'll say something, but go ahead and speak up, guys.
You want to start or do you want to?
I can start. No, yes. Yes is the simple answer. And Jim certainly, and probably John can speak a little better than myself, but I think the emergency order statute we're operating under was crafted in relationship to 9/11. And the design of that was for a few weeks, possibly a month. We're now into our 6th or 7th emergency order, spanning all kinds of different issues. And I just think the people's voice should be heard. And that's what I've heard clearly at home. And there's no reason to the fact that we've now, I think, spent $7 to $9 billion that has come through some of the state programs and agencies and federal monies, that we shouldn't have some oversight and say on that, and or on how these executive orders should or shouldn't move forward. So that's my starting statement on it, but go ahead.
Well, it's a good starting statement, Abdul. So yes, and answer your question, it's very interesting. So literally I've been out campaigning, as most of you know. This is my district, so thank anybody that's here for my district. We would appreciate your vote this November. But secondly, this is the one issue that when I talk to Republicans and Democrats, left and right and center, there's a lot of commonality. And I talk to other members of my colleagues in that what the governor needs, I think the governor's done a good job, and he's been in extraordinary circumstances. But what we're talking about going forward is that there'll be some kind of legislation that very simple, and it basically says this: that the governor cannot have executive orders passed, pick a date, 25 days, 15 days, 30 days, without calling the legislature back into a special session. And the agenda needs to be specific to those executive orders. One of the fears, I know, Abdul, you asked me this question earlier on a radio interview that we had, as you remember, is why weren't we called back in right now? And I think one of the fears and concerns was this cycle that we're in right now is that the agenda could have been on many different topics. Some people obviously are very motivated by social justice. We could have been on discussing that. It could have been on the election. It could have been on the election process. But it really needs to be focused and centered upon the executive orders that the governor has had. And I have not talked to the governor personally, but I would think if Abdul was governor, which would be an interesting thought, by the way, take that rainwater sign down, Abdul for governor, right? Can we take that by consent? That's right. But if Abdul was governor, I think he would want this legislation as well, because you don't want to be so far out there that you're kind of out there on an island. So I think the governor would welcome this. Jim?
Just on this one item, I think that the legislature next year will address it. We also have a possibility. By the way, Scott Baldwin's here, who's a candidate for the Senate, and I want to make sure everybody knew that.
He's not in this district.
Thank goodness, because Rock wouldn't be then, right? But we gave the keys to the car to Mitch Daniels in 2008 and 2009, and Pence kept them, and so has the governor, Governor Eric Holcomb, and he has done an extraordinary job in incredible circumstances. But as I see the legislature in the 3 decades I've been there, there will be a pendulum that goes back to with the experience, and there's a lot of things to talk about with governor power. You're now going to have a Secretary of Education, how is that going to work? And there's also the members of the state school board. So there's going to be a lot of conversations that are going to go on, along with what the governor was able to do, and I think it's a good idea to make it more legislative oriented with oversight. So I think that would be a good point for check and balance.
Well, politically speaking, just for a little clarity, it's become resoundingly difficult for me to defend him from the vantage point that he makes the executive orders down here and they're broadcast out every Wednesday, and back home people call me. And I have no insight. I hear it like they hear it, and I'm interpreting it as they're interpreting it, but I am their conduit to the state. Mm-hmm. And so I guess to the point of calling us back, it would be nice, particularly when you're talking about emergency or executive order situation, if we were kind of all on the same team. And my scenario that I relate to is really the mask thing, which blew up, which was a horrible executive order the way it played out. And I think it could have been done so much differently. If we were all brought in together, all under the impetus of getting our children back to school and making it kind of a short-term commitment, I think the sale of that idea would have been better. Not that we would have liked it any better, but we could have understood it better as legislators and as his feet on the ground back home. But as it turned out, it's like, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was all his call. And so it's like, and that's what's, made your polls interesting. It's made, you're seeing these. I have tons of these up in my neighborhood.
In your yard?
Not in my yard. Jeez, put me on the spot. But it's just
to save you, Andy.
To save me.
Yeah, Indiana is made up of small towns. It's not just John Cougar Mellencamp that said that, and we're probably Pennsylvania is considered like 3 states. We could be considered 4, and you have urban, you have rural, you have poverty, you have well-to-do, and to lead is very difficult in this state, and to put a blanket over the state, and I hope that we have learned through the COVID pandemic that Indiana is made up of small communities, and that's what Andy's actually saying, is that Indianapolis is so much different than Roanoke.
Oh yeah.
And I think we need to recognize that, because as with COVID and how we're taking care of our patients, we're learning more and more how to lead in the state of Indiana. And, Andy, I love what you're saying here, what you're proposing here. I love talking about growth. I love talking about incentives. I love talking about getting in front of our headlights and anticipating the future. And you've got something really great there. I don't know if anything's going to come true, because I truly believe that COVID may have a mad march back, but we'll be able to handle it better, I think. And we're going to be able to control it a little bit more than we did before. We've learned a lot. And with broadband, I see that as the essence. Are you going to cut me off, Club? No. Okay. Okay. I see broadband as just a real necessity here. And we've had these tools for a long time, and if we had started working on it last year, projects probably would be finished now. And so I always say that a gravel road with access to broadband is so much better than paved without. And I think that speaks very, very truthfully to it. But Andy, thank you for bringing this forward. And Ruck, when you're back there next year, I expect and I know you'll be working with him, because the absolute incentive in the growth issue is something that we all believe in and we all can get behind.
And one more, just real quick here. On the issue of how would you define an emergency? Because obviously what the governor's done with his executive orders is he just renews them like every 30, 60 days. So how do you deal with that? And also, how do you define an emergency? Because is it a flood in southern Indiana? Is it fires, they're Bloomington or State Park. How do you define what an emergency actually is?
Well, if you recall back when Mitch Daniels was governor, we had an incredible flood in southern Indiana. And the Daniels administration did not get the credit that were due them with how they handled that crisis. I don't know if you remember, but that Columbus hospital was all just incredibly destroyed by that. And they handled it so well. And that was an emergency that they might have had some executive orders, but the biggest problem they saw was that people that were going into the emergency didn't have the coverage for liability. Doctors didn't, and so we fixed that. And so it's very difficult to define emergency right now, because who knew that a year ago? Who knew that the pandemic would be on it? I can remember going to the microphone on March 3rd, and Senator Landon had talked about this China virus or something that was coming over from China, and why isn't the governor speaking out on this? And I don't know if you gentlemen remember or not, but I took my laptop to the microphone and the podium, and I showed where the governor had already put a task force together. He had a website. We had 10 cases on March 3rd in the state of Indiana, and he was preparing and anticipating the worst. And then little by little we got going and the education on it. And so I think it's you don't want to say that the governor should operate by the seat of his pants, but you never know what the next emergency is going to be.
Do you have any idea of the definition of essential business?
Well, liquor
stores?
Ray, that goes back to Indiana being a 400 small communities. What's essential in Salem, Indiana, or Roanoke, or Madison may not be qualifying in Indianapolis, and so I think it's kind of in the eye of the beholder.
I would never label any business as essential or non-essential. The business owner that sold any investments they had, tapped into their 401k, sold a newer car to invest in that business. I don't care if they're doing hair or dogs or a product or whatever they're doing. That business is essential to that person. And the thing that was particularly disturbing about this for me as I watched the months unfold, not only is it essential to that person, those customers are more essential to the small businessman than they are to our large department stores that were left to completely police themselves. Because that $100 bill coming out of a customer coming into my shop means everything to me, because I don't get the traffic volume that the big stores. If someone were to pass away of the virus in the big stores, there's another person right behind them. If I were to expose and get one of my people sick that know me and spend money at my business, that is painful. And having said that, it doesn't mean that we can't operate government as it needs to be done. And it doesn't mean we can't put out warnings and we can't put out even, talking about masks and different things. We need to be able to function to do that. But we need to be very, very careful. Because when we're talking about people being essential and non-essential, I'd never, ever liked that conversation.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
I have a statement, which I'm sure you'll love, and then 2 questions.
Can we just read your statement? I'm sure you've already made
In
it.
fact, wait a minute.
It's going to be good.
Cindy, would you send it to
Can we take a vote to see if anybody cares about your statement?
Which the statement? Okay. I do. The statement I first want to make is that to whatever degree they decide what to do with that 1.2, obviously I agree with you on the small business, specifically the restaurant and bar industry was devastated during this process, and whether those grants are handled by municipality, something's got to be done. Those guys got slaughtered. Secondly, more of a question. If they got to spend it by December and you're not coming back till January, who gets to decide? And then while you're on that thought, my 2 Hamilton County senators, can you send $42 million to Hamilton County, to Fisher specifically for the overrun on Highway 37? Thank you.
Did my part.
Senate was not involved in that transaction, I don't think.
No, the governor
Yeah.
offered $100 million so we could get reelected.
Who's up?
Well, as I understand it, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it,
And
the
we will.
governor, I know you will, to get the hook, right? So the governor put together the task force that has such persons on, like Luke Kinley, Ryan Kitchell, Becky Skillman, who am I missing?
Kristen Marcaselli.
Kristen Marcaselli, yes. So
You're lobbying to them.
well, this is an advisory group that the
They're
governor put together
advisory.
to help administer and give advice to the expenditures of the CARES Act dollars, okay? And so what they're doing is going through the process now of that machination of how the money should be spent and where it should go. Now, one thing I'm going to put as a caveat that we haven't talked about that impacts all small businesses and impacts all business owners in general is the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. So the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, it gets very little publicity right now, but it is broke. So we just got out of that in 2011, 13. We had just paid it back off after borrowing over $2 billion in 2007, 2008. So we're projected to be about $300 million in negative, in the red, if you will. So what's important about that is the way the CARES Act is set up right now is that we get through the end of the year, we, the state of Indiana, and employers don't have to pay any insurance, or excuse me, any interest money on that to pay that money back, because the feds are going to want that back. So there is going to be discussion with this working group that may be part of that, is to make sure that that trust fund is whole, because otherwise employers would lose their FUTA, Federal Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, deduction. And that's huge. You don't want employers to get a tax increase at this time. So that's one thing that this group is working on right now as a caveat. Gentlemen?
What? Go ahead.
I forgot the question.
All right. I would say, you know, as we've moved along, I'm not sure that, I think it has been a good thing to be conservative and to be very methodical about this. And the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund is a great example of that. If we have to move $300 to $400 million over to stabilize that, to keep us all employers in a better position, yes, that would be worth that. And if we would have dispersed all this stuff very quickly, it wouldn't be there to even have the conversation. So to the governor and his team's defense, that's, you know, it's been prudent. To the Hamilton County question, the simple answer is no. As of 2 weeks ago, $17 million has been dispersed of CARES Act funds. 25% of that of the money has been dispersed to Hamilton County. The top 3 disbursements are Fishers, Carmel, and Hamilton County. So you have 25% of the money for 5% of the people. So no.
So I represent those areas. I think that's a pretty good senator, right?
Great job, John.
That's right. Return on the investment.
But
The money.
well, but having said that,
Yeah.
but
But it's 42 million too late, okay?
But, okay, having said that, they did get some additional guidance from the federal administration last week or 2 weeks, and the governor committed $300 million to cities and counties right away, and it was a commitment, but it just simply wasn't being dispersed. Everything had to be related to COVID, and it was just a hot mess. But so 2 weeks ago, they gave clarification that those monies could be spent on public safety. And so you will see that money go flying out the door now. So that $300 million will be eaten up in payroll to police, fire, EMS, and all that. So I expect that money, that $300 million portion, will be spent very quickly in the next few weeks, because most of the
And
counties.
that's on operating?
Yeah,
Payroll.
they got permission to use it for that. And the whole intent was never to backfill budgets where locals are going to be missing out on monies. So this, in essence, will kind of do that because they'll be able to pay their public safety people and they can push that money to other spots.
Well, since we just improved the new 9/11 tax that doubled the expense necessary, we should have like $8 million just laying around to fix the road.
Whatever you say.
We can't be taxed enough.
We could chip and seal it like we do up in my parts.
I'm going to take this opportunity to plug in a commercial here. I would like to thank George's Neighborhood Grill
George.
for hosting. We're not done. I just know that most people will tune out eventually, and I want to get the plugs in early.
Smart man.
I also want to thank Adam Hoffer and VITREON Group for doing all our AV equipment in the pre-setup. Great job, Adam. Also like to thank all the business owners that are here tonight. Looks like we have about 15 of you split between the Greater Lawrence Chamber and the Indiana Licensed Beverage Association. So thank you all for attending. Now I know our next question is coming from Ross Snyder, principal at USI Engineering, a company that did not apparently get the State Road 37 project.
I'm not bitter about that.
Brad, you
No,
gotta
I-
stand right here.
I want to thank all three of you for your stewardship and leadership, and a couple of you senators I just got to know over the past year or two, some longer than others. Thank you. But I wanted to ask, where does the state budget stand? So one, I watched a show, Indiana Week in Review, and Abdul, you're not on it, but Ann Delaney was saying for years, we should spend that money down. We should get rid of that money. Well, thank goodness that wasn't done. So
Correct.
where does it stand, and how is that leading into a budget session?
Well, it rained. So the rainy day fund thus far has been accessible and been there for everything we have fought for years. And for me, it's been a little bit shorter, but we've defended it. We've defended it amongst a lot of great ideas, economic development ideas, education ideas. And my understanding was I think we've tapped it for about $1 billion, maybe a touch more than that. So we're at $2.4 billion, so I think it stands somewhere about 1.1 to 1.3, somewhere in there. The governor instituted 15% cuts in all agencies. That will help going forward. The simple conversation is nothing's off the table. It's going to be a tough year. We have to wait to see how things come in. We had a little bit of a trick because the year end hit when we extended the income tax from April to July, so it looked really bad, but then it did come in pretty solid. I can't recall exactly where, but it seemed like it was 80 or 90% of what we were expecting, so it was pretty good. Obviously, our gaming revenue for the state is a mess. We didn't have any for approximately 6 months. I don't know how the pent-up demand is going and how well we're recovering there. But we will start. At one point, it was projected to be $2 to $3 billion down. I assume we'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion less, and we're just going to have to figure out how to do that. And Indiana will. We will find a way. We're going to balance the budget because that's the way we do. And I tell you, coming in, that is the one thing that impressed me the most. It's not a conversation. It's not an idea or a wish. It is the way we do business in Indiana in the legislative branch. And that is something we fight for and advocate till the end.
Just to compound on that, I think Andy did a good job of summarizing that, but as I understand it, we went into this with, $2.3 billion surplus, and as I understand, the first 3 months we burned through $1 billion. Now, as a result of some of the CARES Act dollars backfilling that, but also the biggest hit was the fact that we moved the tax collections from April 15 to July 15. So it's my understanding that when the smoke cleared, we're literally about $500 million behind. So it's not as bad as we thought. Interestingly, Indiana in the last great recession, manufacturing took the biggest hit. That's why our budget took probably a bigger hit than disproportionately most states. But in the COVID issue that we've seen is travel, entertainment, tourism. Those are the areas hit the most. Andy said it exactly right. So one of the things that I think going forward that we have to have great concern about and great caution about is, think about this. And Scott, we're glad you're going to be coming on board because we're going to need your help. In the state of Indiana, 40% of the revenues for our budget, 40% comes from central Indiana. We've got to get Indianapolis downtown back running. We've got to get it moving again. That's the long-term issue that we're looking at, correct, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
That is a major issue that we're going to be keeping our eye on, is that economic engine that is central Indiana. 40% to pay teachers, to keep the parks open, et cetera. So we're really going to have to hone in on that.
Ruck, I'm really glad you brought that up because as the mayoral candidate last year, all I talked about was what a robust Indianapolis does for the state of Indiana. Well, we're going to get a real indication of what a dead Indianapolis is going to drag Indiana down, and it's how you respond to it. And I don't know if the legislature will make a move to kind of take over Indianapolis for a certain amount of time. The CIB is broke, and it's that is our capital city, and that is really the engine that runs the state government. And 40% is Central Indiana. I think it's probably right around 27-28%. And if I would have been mayor, I would have gone to the legislature and said, we are valuable to you, and help us grow and help us solve some of the problems we have. And it's going to have to be on steroids now, because as Indianapolis goes, so goes Indiana, and economically. And it's going to be very important for the legislature to support the city.
Jim, you bring up a good point, and I guess I'd like to get your thoughts on some of those issues, like homelessness and public safety and those kind of things. I mean, obviously, Central Indiana has a lot of other issues that were brought on by the pandemic. Vacant offices.
Yeah,
and so
Ray,
forth and so on.
great questions.
But we could spend the whole night, I think, talking about it. But
Yeah.
how can the legislature help where local government has failed?
Well, it's a great question, and something that I want to spend a lot of time in the coming years on. You talk about homelessness. Speaker Bosma had a piece of legislation, and he rarely in his 34 years of being in the legislature had legislation. It really approached the homelessness issue. And then as soon as we passed it, as soon as the governor signed it, the Civil Liberties Union just completely dampened it with a lawsuit. And I truly believe we need to get to a point where we understand why we have homelessness, and we need to have the courage to establish a system for those individuals who are homeless. It's all about mental illness. It's all about having the courage to find a solution. And I think what the state of Indiana needs to do is quantify what the financial impact of homelessness is, not just in downtown Indianapolis, but throughout the state, because we have urban poverty, but we also have rural poverty. We have small town poverty. We have big city poverty. And I think you just put your foot. I think you put your foot right in the right place in the way of what Indianapolis is struggling from. And they say over 45-50% of people that are homeless are suffering from mental illness, who ordinarily, when we were young, they would be at Central State, they'd be at Muscatatuck, they'd be at Newcastle, and then we took the rug and we said, oh, they'll go to group homes. That didn't work. We were going to fund it with the money that we spent on those hospitals, and we're going to fund it, but we forgot the housing piece. And so what we need to do is we need to take those individuals who are homeless, treat them almost like a CHINS type of patient, like a kid as a ward of the court, and put together an understanding of what is the problem, solve that problem, and then get them into the next category of life. And we just need to take the time and having the understanding of what the impact of police, Indianapolis being a convening place where maybe people don't want to come back because they've been assaulted by a homeless person, and just the social aspect of the city of Indianapolis and what is quantifiable, and that will give people the courage to vote for maybe a regional approach to homelessness.
All right, I've got a question, just because we've been talking about gaming and estate budgets, and those two things go hand in hand. While I don't typically look to our neighbors to the west in Illinois for any sort of guidance, maybe the one good thing that they've done in the last half dozen years, they legalized electronic gaming in bars and
I
restaurants.
thought we
over
were going
there.
to start talking about pot.
Well, there's that. Okay. All right.
Is that next?
Solve all
I'll
our
leave that to my
financial-
libertarian
God
friends.
bless you too.
So anyhow, it's estimated that if they allowed upwards of 5 electronic games per establishment in Indiana, that could raise about $200 million a year to the state of Indiana or local governments, however you want to split it, and pump another $200 million into those local establishments that have obviously been hurt. What are your thoughts on legalizing something like that, just to help local businesses and help the budget?
I think it's easy right now. I get the sensitivity of the issue before and how the expanse of gambling, but we're looking at 50% to 60% NFIB tells me of these type of businesses closing. If we can give them a shot in the arm with this right now, I think it's essential. And I don't even know that I'm philosophically for it, but that would fit into getting that a stimulus, but a productive stimulus from the standpoint that it's giving them an attraction in their establishment to bounce out of this. We would need to visit the number. Would it be 1? Would it be 5? Would it be 3 years? Would it be 5 years? Would it be forever? And those would be difficult discussions. But I think pragmatically, in the times we're in right now, there may be no better way to give those folks a shot in the arm than doing this. And they had been there before, right? We had this in some of our clubs and bars and taverns before. You still have some in the basement, probably, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Klopp, if it gives Bill Smythe a real job, I'm all for it.
Define a real job.
Just thank his wife he's not homeless.
Yeah.
Senator Ruckelshaus, would you care to comment?
I honestly, other than Senator Smythe over here, I
No.
don't.
Don't go there.
51st Senator. Everything's on the table. Everything's on the table as far as I'm concerned.
The governor of Hamilton County.
Senator Merritt, you mentioned earlier you wanted to see what was in Andy's yard. You're going to have a lot of time after November, so if
No,
you,
I'm not.
Well, okay, I was going to say, if you and your bride wanted to hop in the truck with Sheila and I, we could go visit Andy, see what's up there.
There'll be leaves in the yard then.
All right, we have a question here for Brad Nicholson, who owns a couple bars here in Indy.
Yeah. One, I thank you all for being here, and I appreciate you kind of touched my heart on the non-essential thing, being a non-essential business owner in Marion County. One is, I don't know that it matters what you pass in the state or what the governor says if you have businesses in Marion County.
Yeah.
We're extremely irrelevant. It doesn't matter what's going on.
Yeah.
Me being 1 mile from Hendricks County, it's heartbreaking. As I go back home when I shut down at midnight, 75% of our income is 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. All right, one of my 2 establishments still is not open. It has been closed since March 16th. When I was told for 2 weeks, just participate, being a patriot, being a part of the community, no problem. Didn't even question it. I will never not question something like that again, ever. I feel lied to. I feel betrayed. Maybe I'm not what everybody likes in their community. All right, I have a 32,000 square foot live entertainment venue called 8 Second Saloon. We run national acts. I'm everything that you do not want to be during a pandemic.
I bet you
Mass gatherings,
met
live
some
entertainment.
great people in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, one of the things that I never hear anybody ever talk about that would really to get my question is, with the 8 seconds, we've been closed since March 16th. If we did not, me and my brother, if we did not own our property, we would be bankrupt. But we own, thank God we own our property. We have, between the 2 places, I have 75 employees. I have 11 employed right now. Of those 75 I do have, 9 of them that make more than $75,000 a year. Those 9 are not part of the 11 that are employed. When we shut down on March 16th, our electric bill, again, it's 32,000 square foot club. It used to be a bowling alley. It was at Lyndhurst Bowl at one time. The beer companies came, picked up their beer so they wouldn't go outdated. So we shut off. We unplugged the walk-in coolers. We unplugged all of our reach-in coolers. We went through and shut off every neon. We returned all of our food, all of our freezers, our refrigerators. What I'm saying, we didn't run air or heat. A light bulb in an office is what was on. Our electric bill prior to the pandemic was $5,200 a month. After the pandemic, guess what it was?
$5,200.
Exactly. Because of the on-demand charges. We couldn't get around them. We couldn't get anybody from IPL to speak with us. We made 6 phone calls and couldn't get past whoever you would talk to on that first call. Finally, we hired one of your colleagues, Senator Young, as our attorney. One letter, and all of a sudden, one of the top guys from IPL is calling us. His suggestion was nothing he could do. Sorry, you're shut down and closed. And in that 6 months, we did pay $30,000 in electric bill with no electricity, but 1 light bulb. And I'm not exaggerating. Zero help, nothing we can do, sorry. He did, when we finally got to the top guys, set us up for a budget plan where we'll pay approximately around $2,800 a month until we can open again. All right? But his suggestion was for me to, and he says, what all the big corporations do is set yourself up on a bunch of different meters, so when you have that 15-minute cycle, you don't have anything surging. And I said, where am I supposed to, in the middle of a pandemic, bring in a bunch of electricians and rerun everything in here to beat the system? Why is there a system to be beat? Why am I just being charged for the electricity that I use? That's my question.
Well, that's exactly that. That is the system, and it's not built for a pandemic. It certainly is not. And the only explanation is that the utilities have set costs and they pass them on to their customer. And I'm not saying if it's right or wrong, but it is what it is, and it's not right. It is not right. And one of the big parts of leadership is actually understanding who you represent and trusting who you represent. And I think as leaders, anybody from the president to the governor on down to dog catcher have to understand what makes their community tick. And I don't understand the leadership in this community, and you're a victim of that.
I wish we could vote again.
I hear that a lot.
Wow.
Jim, if only you would have run for mayor.
Well, and hey, I was born, lived, and raised in the business world. There's nothing better than making a profit. But what really bothered me throughout this is business owners like yourself that are spending their last dollar remortgaging the properties they owned, dipping into all kinds of cash flow just to keep their head above water, while we watched our brethren in the big industries having record profits. Anthem is on pace this year to make more money than the state budget. In the second quarter, they made almost $3 billion. Home Depot is off the charts. Kroger, Amazon, pick your company. Those guys, and that's fine. But when we're being told as small business owners that we have to close, and we are having options, as you had, taken away to even facilitate keeping our head above water, there's just something in there that is not right. And to define one as essential and the other as non is a further problem. And I don't know. That's what drove me to try and come up with something to spring us out of that. And I know it doesn't change that, but you're not alone. And there were too many business owners that were going through the very same thing and being told similar things. Well, we just need a couple more weeks. We can open you up.
Okay, here's my weird, bizarre question since everything is on the table. Why, thank you. We do try.
Is it a Superman question?
No, that's just my face mask.
Abdul, do you have shoes on?
Yes.
This dude doesn't.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So here's my weird question. Since everything is on the table, where are you gentlemen with legalized marijuana? Either for
I knew that was coming.
either for medicinal purposes or recreational.
You know, Abdul,
Bull has a vested interest.
Klopp, what's your opinion?
Yeah.
Legalize it.
Tomorrow.
Lawrence stands to make lots of money, I think, if it's legalized.
You know, if I were a leader of the free world, what I would do is I would.
You're being filmed, Jim.
I think President Trump missed a great opportunity, and what should have happened is they should have taken it by the FDA and made one final study of it and reprocess it and put it on the market because how many states now are 10?
Oh,
But-
no. 20-some.
Actually, almost 30.
Now 30, okay. There are 10 there aren't. Yeah, but I guess my point has always been that it's a gateway drug. But I will tell you, though, that I've come so far as with the medical aspect of it, I am so supportive of that, especially for veterans. And I would be happy to support that if I was going to be at the legislature this next session.
Yeah, so let me tell you a funny story. So it's the 2016, it was one of the final forums we were doing. Abdul, you were the moderator, if you remember that. And my opponent, you put that up there. And during that time, kind of like it is now, the main question was, what's your stance on Donald Trump? So we were literally prepared for this question for like weeks, and we get up there. And Abdul, you started out by saying, Ruckelshaus, I'm going to ask you the hardest question you've ever had, the question that keeps you up at night. You don't want to talk about it. And I looked at Abdul and I said, you mean Trump? And he goes, no, marijuana. So I said, I'll take marijuana for 500, please. That was the easiest question of the whole campaign, and it still is easy today. So I'm very comfortable and would be very supportive of medical marijuana. I've also thought we should have last session, and if not last session, this next session, I think our Alcohol Tobacco Commission should be putting together the framework now of what that regulatory piece would look like for the state of Indiana, right? Plow the ground, put the infrastructure together, and as well as look at all the best practices of the other states so we're ready, we're good to go.
I think that's smart.
And then on the recreational side, let's let the United States Congress legalize and reduce the criminal penalties on that, and then good to go there.
I think President Biden will do that.
Yeah.
We don't care what you think.
Sure.
Let me get Mr. Zay.
If we think
Well,
that,
I was just,
Go ahead.
when I went through hospice with my mother, she was on stuff that was worse than anything that marijuana would offer. And these were drugs that are taken on the street now. So is there a role for it in the medical community? Absolutely. Do we need to be prescribing it for hangnails? I don't think so. But to that extent, I think we do need some federal clarity. I think we need to support our law enforcement and those that will be working around the edges of this to understand it. Jim and I have done extensive work in the drug arena with your commitment to kill heroin in 5. A lot of folks will tell you it's a gateway drug. It's something that they get into opioids, they get into heroin. I've sat with those folks. I've spent a lot of time with those folks. It is a very fractured, difficult community. And they don't tell you that legalizing marijuana is the answer. They tell you that taking marijuana is what led them on the path. Because one who spoke at my event that I had in Wabash, Voices of Recovery, is doing a wonderful job down in southern Indiana right now. And she was getting marijuana for her mother at 4 years old. and sampling it herself by the time she was 10. And before she was 15 years old, was already addicted to heroin. I don't know if marijuana was the path. I don't know what created that. I don't know what created that path, if it was a social path because her mother didn't have the support system she needed. But to hear those stories and to look at the expansiveness of the drugs that we prescribe and take for everything, particularly now with COVID. But even before that, we're trying to treat people with drugs that are getting off of drugs. I sat next to a gal that was addicted, I kid you not, she was addicted to methadone, went through the legal system, came out, was in a halfway house. They prescribed her to a methadone clinic. She said, they sent me to my drug of choice. She said it made no sense to me at all. And I know I'm getting on the fringes. I know that, you know, many of you look at that a little bit differently. But I think we need some federal clarity to fully recreationalize it. If the medical community wants to embrace it, I think there's definitely an avenue for that to be.
So my question to everybody would be, if marijuana has medicinal uses, and it may very well have, why is it the only substance that has not been studied, not had the active pieces of it isolated and put into a prescription that can be prescribed for the exact malady that you may have that may benefit you?
Well,
instead of that, it's the only substance that we treat differently, and we just prescribe marijuana for a whole bunch of things, and it's really not standardized.
Well, I think it's an incremental. I think we're moving toward it. I think you see CBD, I think with the 20 or 40 states. I think that we're going to get there. I just, it's a generational situation, and it was a lot like when we voted to combine the police department with the sheriff's department. One of the things that we insisted upon was a study 5 years after it to see if it was beneficial or not. No study.
Of course.
No study whatsoever. And I think that all these states that have legalized it are the trailblazers, and we're going to look back in time at the situations that have presented themselves in those states that have legalized marijuana, and of course they've picked up the cash. It's been a really great thing for them, but we're also going to find out the warts on it, and hopefully the federal government, and I truly think it ought to be a federal government decision on the recreational part. But
I got to jump in and say, is that how you analyze gambling in the state of Indiana? Allow that to happen? Because I think that winds up, I think they can hear me.
Yeah.
That winds up becoming a gateway of all kinds of things I come back to, and I'm going to let the answer be at some point.
Yeah.
Is the idea that those that are interested are going to be interested. And if you've all smoked marijuana, then you realize that you had a choice of what was next. You could press it on because you were trying to stuff something emotionally, psychologically, et cetera, or you just enjoyed yourself just like I am in Coors Light right now.
Well, I mean, you raised a very good point. Back in 1990, I was up for my first election. Somebody asked me, well, how do you feel about gambling? And it really hadn't hit Indiana yet. And then all of a sudden, 1991 comes, and 1993 comes, and all of a sudden we've got these boats that actually are seaworthy, and we have 8 or 9 gambling licenses, and the drip of money going into these communities. Lawrenceburg had gold sidewalks, I'm sure, and so it's almost like getting not religion, but you get used to it, and little by little, gambling has become a way of life in the state of Indiana, and probably the same thing with marijuana.
It's keeping our radio stations alive, aren't they? All the ads.
Yeah.
We have another question up front.
When do I get to go home?
This is dangerous. I'm so sorry. I'm
retired.
going to try to
He's
bring this
retired.
back
You
to.
can leave whenever you want.
I'm going to bring this back to Senator Zay's agenda here and tell you that I think this is much to Abdul's dismay. an incredibly positive agenda for small business and
Thank you.
working with the small business every day. I mean, our Butler University Center has had, just last month alone, over 320 unique and new business inquiries.
That's
I
great.
mean, we cover 8 counties, and those are businesses. Those are people who call us who want to start a business, expand a business, figure out how to navigate the economic injury loans, everything that's out there. So the agenda is powerful. It really is. And I have questions on the health pooling system still. I would love to understand that more. I don't think this maybe is the venue to get into the details. But I commend you on this, and I would love to see the revolving loan program, and sorry, Senator Zay, for the prioritization of the small business loan program over the rural broadband.
Right.
But you can do both. With $1.2 billion, you can. It's a powerful tool right now, and it's difficult. And you've hit on so many good topics with regards to who's been impacted. I thank you for this. This is a great direction and worthy of Senate discussion, 100%. And to Senator Ruckelshaus, we've had conversations in the past with one of our clients, and quite honestly, you haven't taken enough credit for Saving Department of Children's Services. I don't even know what the official name is, the Child Protective Services. Kudos to you. Thank you for everything you've done. So thank you.
guys too. Thank you. Thank you.
All right,
You too,
gentlemen,
Andy.
as Senator Merritt has pointed out, it's dark outside.
Hey,
So now we're going to start asking the hard questions. No, we're not going to do that. My last question is, given that this event is sponsored by both the Greater Lawrence Chamber of Commerce and the Indiana Licensed Beverage Association, what is your favorite establishment in Lawrence to enjoy?
Are we in Lawrence? Yes. George's then, naturally.
We are in Lawrence Township,
Stick
so
with the home team.
yes, I've answered it.
Well, I know Jim George, so yes, this is it.
all right, there we go. All right, gentlemen, on behalf.
Well,
yes.
wait a minute. Can I just say one thing in closing?
You always have to have the last word.
Jimmy, this is for you.
He is running
let
for
me-
re-election.
So that's right. That's right. Well, no, this is from the heart, because I think we all owe a debt of gratitude to the person to my right, Senator Jim Merritt. Jim Merritt. Hold on. Yeah, we're going to do it in a second here, but Jim.
That's enough.
Jim has dedicated his life to this job. He has dedicated, and there's been sacrifice along the way, right, Jim? And I know it's not been easy. I know none of this is easy. You talked about what's the definition of emergency. Right now, it's because my wife hasn't seen me in 3 weeks, and when I go home and I walk in, she asks for photo ID. That's the definition of emergency right now. But it's a great sacrifice that any of us put forth to do this job. And Jim has done so many things for the state of Indiana that the history books will be voluminous in writing it, Jim. And there's a lot of people, just think of the Lifeline law that he wrote and how impactful, and that saved lives on college campuses and in our high schools. And how many parents have their children today because of that. Jim, you'll probably never get all the credit you deserve, but all of us, Andy and I are in the same class together, and all of us thank you for everything you've done. So Jimmy,
Thank you. Thank you. Still a great tale.
Senator Merritt. Senator Merritt, I concur. You've been a good friend of mine for quite some time. Thank you for your friendship, and I look forward to continuing that. Thank you to everyone who has shown up. Senators, thank you all for being here and participating. Obviously, this was short notice, but I think this is probably one of the finer programs that the Greater Lawrence Chamber has put together in quite some time. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. Please hang out here at George's Neighborhood Grill and have dinner and more drinks and enjoy yourselves. This sounds like Jim might have to go home, but and John might be homeless. So
I'm all good.
And Andy's staying at my house. So in any case, feel free to mix and mingle and ask them questions. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support, and hopefully we'll do this sometime soon.